Hi everyone, I'm Will, and welcome back to the channel. You know that feeling when a film lingers in your body long after the credits roll? That strange tension in the chest, the way the world looks slightly more grim, slightly more rigged, like your spirit has been dampened without you knowing why? That's what we uncover here. Because films like The Hunger Games, Catching Fire aren't just entertainment. They are emotional software. They quietly redraw the lines of our imagination, narrowing the space in which we believe freedom is possible. And unless we see the machinery behind the story, we carry those limits with us. But something begins to shift the moment we notice. Awareness has a texture. It steadies the breath, clears the fog, and returns power to the viewer. That's what we do here. We unmask the structure beneath the spectacle and trace the emotional instructions layered into the script. And when we're done, I'll show you what a more human version of this story might look like. One that heals instead of controls. The Hunger Games, Catching Fire is the second installment in the globally acclaimed dystopian series, directed by Francis Lawrence and featuring Jennifer Lawrence as the iconic Katniss Everdeen, with standout performances by Josh Hutcherson as Peeta Mellark, Donald Sutherland as the calculating President Snow, and Philip Seymour Hoffman as the enigmatic Plutarch Heavensbee. As a direct continuation of the first film, Catching Fire appears to simply raise the stakes. Former victors are summoned once again to compete in a special edition of the games known as the Quarter Quell, all while political tension brews in the districts. On its surface, the narrative expands the world, introduces new characters, and sets the groundwork for revolution. But beneath its blockbuster surface, this film performs a far more insidious psychological function. It is a meticulously constructed delivery system for emotional and ideological conditioning. Catching Fire teaches its viewers, especially impressionable adolescents, how to endure systemic powerlessness. It trains them to suppress their outrage, to accept trauma as character building, and to view acts of submission disguised as survival tactics as morally heroic. It doesn't just depict oppression, it simulates it for the viewer, embedding obedience and learned helplessness through emotional mimicry. The film also operates as a textbook example of predictive programming. Through its presentation of a society under total surveillance, managed by fear and distracted by orchestrated media rituals, it normalizes a future of compliant citizens whose emotions are weaponized and whose rebellions are channeled into state-sanctioned performances. This isn't just dystopia for entertainment's sake. It is emotional rehearsal for a future in which rebellion is permitted only under specific narrative terms. We are shown how to dissent performatively while leaving the real structures of power untouched. And in this way, Catching Fire dresses psychological submission in the language of revolution. It offers the viewer a carefully contained version of resistance, one that is scripted, controlled, and ultimately folded back into the machinery of domination. While the plot may speak of rebellion, the emotional experience it offers conditions compliance. This is not a call to awaken. It is a lullaby masked as a battle cry. Section 1. Trauma repackaged as strength. We begin in the cold aftermath of survival. Katniss returns home, hollowed out by trauma, performing normality in a world where the rules have shifted beneath her feet. She walks through familiar terrain with a haunted gaze, but nothing feels intact. What we're witnessing is not recovery. It is suppression, polished and rehearsed for public consumption. Her silence is misread as stoicism. Her exhaustion is rebranded as maturity. But what the film encodes beneath the surface is something far more dangerous: the normalization of emotional shutdown as virtue. From the first scene, the psychological framework is set. A system has broken her, and now it doesn't reward her with freedom, but with obligation. Her job is to smile for the cameras, embody gratitude, and act out her trauma as entertainment. and the viewer is trained to mirror that same emotional posture, to see suppression as strength, to interpret compliance as courage. Katniss becomes the vessel through which young viewers are taught to keep quiet, perform resilience, and internalize powerlessness as grace. Her pain is never truly named, and therefore it is never truly healed. This omission is the first and most crucial conditioning step. The wound must remain invisible. She is told repeatedly, by Effie, by Snow, by Haymitch, that her job now is to pretend, to be grateful, to be in love. The real emotions are irrelevant. Only the televised version matters. This is where the programming begins. Pain is no longer something to process. It is something to disguise. She must cloak grief in politeness, cloak anger in romance, and cloak fear in duty. What the viewer learns, especially the adolescent viewer, is that survival requires silence. There is no silence, only emotional muteness. You keep breathing, but you no longer respond. You play the role you are assigned. The quote that locks this idea in comes early. When Katniss is told to fake her love story for the cameras, she says, "I'm never going to be able to do this, Peeta." That moment lands heavy because we know she doesn't mean acting. She means surviving the lie. Her pain is being monetized. Her emotional life is no longer her own. She is a product now, a character in a state-sanctioned fairy tale. And we, the viewers, are being trained to accept that pain as performance is both necessary and noble. This is how the system ensures its continuity. It doesn't silence dissent outright. Instead, it rewards those who can mask their inner collapse in a language that makes power look benevolent. In Catching Fire, trauma becomes branding. Compliance becomes currency. And numbness is repackaged as strength. Section 2. Manufactured consent through spectacle. As the victory tour begins, the second layer of emotional conditioning emerges. Manufactured consent through spectacle. What might appear as a celebratory tour on the surface, smiling faces, grand feasts, ornate costumes, is in truth a meticulously engineered psychological operation. The people in the districts are starving, grieving, oppressed. Yet their pain is neutralized by the presence of paraded victors and rehearsed rituals. In this sense, the Hunger Games itself is no longer just a deadly contest. It is a nationwide festival of emotional misdirection. The system does not silence grief with force. It drowns it in performance. Grief is not honored. It is rebranded as content. Suffering is turned into a stage prop. Katniss and Peeta, survivors of unimaginable trauma, are forced to offer scripted eulogies to families of the children they were made to kill. What should be sacred is turned into political theater. The audience in the district sees actors performing sorrow. The audience outside the film, the real-world viewer, learns that emotional authenticity must often be surrendered in exchange for survival. And this is where the conditioning deepens. Catching Fire doesn't just portray how governments manipulate optics. It immerses you in the experience of being emotionally manipulated yourself. You feel the tension as Katniss delivers her speech. You feel the relief when she survives each new public event. And over time, your nervous system is trained to accept these rhythms, to expect pain, then accept its deferral as catharsis. This is the very architecture of trauma bonding through media. Effie Trinket, a character defined by her forced cheer and capital loyalty, encapsulates this perfectly when she exclaims with robotic delight, "This is going to be the best quarter quell ever." It is a grotesque moment. Yet it passes, unchallenged, because the film itself mirrors that grotesque logic, where horror can be repackaged as progress and violence is sold as tradition. That quote functions as an anchor for the viewer. It teaches you to laugh, to tolerate absurdity, and to continue watching. More than that, the pageantry conditions belief. The Capitol's propaganda machine uses color, fashion, and symmetry to override instinct. What should be repulsive becomes mesmerizing. What should incite rage becomes visually hypnotic. The message embedded in every dress, every televised moment is simple. Obedience can be beautiful. Grief can be curated. And if the framing is flawless, even injustice becomes palatable. This is mirrored with brutal accuracy in our own world, where war is branded with music, where news coverage turns death into ticker tape drama, where celebrities tweet condolences between ad campaigns. The message is clear. Don't look too closely. Just applaud on cue. In Catching Fire, the spectacle does not distract from the suffering. It redefines it. And by consuming it, both the fictional districts and the real-world viewer are subtly taught that the correct response to injustice is neither revolt nor mourning. It is attention. It is viewership. It is applause. And in this way, the emotional consent of the audience is harvested in plain sight. Section 3. The Illusion of Rebellion. As the quarter quell is announced, we enter the heart of the film's predictive programming, the illusion of rebellion. The shock twist, that all former victors are to be reaped again, is framed as an act of cruelty, as if the system is lashing out in desperation. But what is actually occurring is far more sinister. The system is not reacting to rebellion. It is preemptively controlling it. It co-opts dissent by scripting it. This isn't rebellion as threat, it's rebellion as theater. Katniss is presented as a threat to the Capitol, yet everything that follows reveals the opposite. Her influence is not destroyed. It is absorbed, redirected, and contained. The games themselves are not repositioned as punishment, but as a reset ritual, a way of eliminating symbols of resistance while convincing the public that the system remains unshakable. In this world, even rebellion must be orchestrated by the architects of power. Even uprisings, we are shown, need permission. And if rebellion is inevitable, it must be choreographed in advance. The quarter quell becomes a masterstroke in narrative manipulation. The state does not deny the existence of discontent. It weaponizes it. By placing the victors back into the arena, it sends a message to every citizen watching. There is no immunity from control. Even those who were once exalted can be stripped of safety. The public, already teetering on the edge of revolt, is given a message embedded with threat. Your heroes are disposable. This is the psychological genius of the quarter quell. It appears irrational, but it is strategically brilliant. It recasts victors, the few people with any moral authority, as participants once again in state-sanctioned murder. By forcing them back into the arena, the system rebrands rebellion as a selfish illusion. Every defiant act is folded back into the structure of control. You rebel, and they broadcast it. You resist, and they own the footage. It's a mechanism of catharsis for the system. The system doesn't just punish rebellion. It contains it, performs it, and then punishes it in public so the audience can participate in both the drama and the shame. The viewer is conditioned to see resistance as an inevitability that is ultimately self-destructive. The message is clear. Challenge the system, and you will either become the villain or the next tribute. President Snow delivers a chilling line that crystallizes this logic. By the time the whole world sees this message, everyone will know exactly who to blame. That moment is the fulcrum of the film's psychological machinery. It's not just a threat to Katniss. It is a meta-warning to the audience. Narrative belongs to the state. Interpretation belongs to power. Emotion belongs to the editors. And memory, once broadcast, is rewritten. The film shows us this and trains us to feel its inevitability. And so we are shown a rebellion that is dramatic, emotional, and utterly unthreatening. It ends where it began, inside the arena. The very structure of the games becomes a metaphor for how all dissent is processed. Anger is given a channel. Pain is turned into a script. Symbols are assigned and then sacrificed. You feel something is wrong, and the film gives you a ritual to express it. But that ritual changes nothing. This is emotional laundering. We're not being warned. We're being rehearsed. This isn't fantasy. It's preparation. Catching Fire operates like a dry run for what controlled revolution looks like in the modern age. Cameras on every face. Tragedy framed through beauty. Violence staged for empathy. Authority isn't just watching from above, it's watching from within. By participating emotionally in this carefully managed revolt, the viewer is trained to equate spectacle with transformation. The film guides its audience through a performance of rebellion, one that offers every emotional beat of revolution without any of its structural consequences. The arena becomes the perfect arena of emotional rehearsal. Repeatable, narratable, survivable. Within it, you can scream, mourn, fight, and even destroy, as long as you do it on cue, as long as you leave the foundations intact. This is the true predictive programming of the story. It instructs us to believe that rebellion is supposed to be televised. That revolution requires an anthem, that if we feel seen, we have already won. But what Catching Fire reveals, without the viewer fully noticing, is that visibility is not the same as freedom, and feeling something is not the same as changing something. In the end, the result is devastating. It conditions viewers to accept a world where every movement is known in advance, every response anticipated, and every uprising already accounted for. It doesn't teach you to act. It teaches you to perform. It doesn't teach you to organize. It teaches you to feel. And it prepares you, emotionally and neurologically, to live inside a system where even your rage has already been rehearsed for you. Section 4. Obedience and emotional detachment. Once the arena sequence begins, Catching Fire shifts from overt spectacle to something far more insidious. Psychological obedience training. The arena is not just a battleground. It is a behavioral lab. Every element inside it functions as a control mechanism. The fog, the mutts, the poison, the time-locked horrors. But more than that, it is an emotional classroom. The true subject being tested isn't Katniss. It's us. The film teaches that survival depends on a very specific form of adaptation. Emotional detachment. The characters are placed under relentless stress not just to elicit drama, but to model behavior. The unspoken lesson is clear. If you want to live, you must feel less. The narrative slowly erodes empathy, reframing it as vulnerability. Pain is shown, but never processed. Grief is acknowledged, but always deferred. Suffering must be endured, never expressed. Katniss begins the games already emotionally strained, but inside the arena, that strain is rebranded as strategy. Her numbness becomes a form of tactical brilliance. Each horror she encounters, the acid fog, the death of Mags, the Jabberjay screams, further fragments her emotional integrity. And yet the structure of the story never allows her to fall apart. Instead, it forces her to continue. The message is encoded. There is no time for healing, only action. This emotional bypassing is framed as strength. But in reality, it is obedience. To keep going while broken. To smile while grieving. To protect while in pain. These are survival instincts repackaged as virtues, not for the benefit of the characters, but for the viewer. Young audiences especially are shown that heroism looks like suppression. That maturity means silence. That courage means carrying your trauma without flinching. This is not resilience. It is self-erasure. A pivotal moment that captures this logic is when Johanna slices the tracker from Katniss's arm. It is brutal, unexpected, and unexplained. Katniss winces but does not scream. She doesn't ask why. And the film offers no immediate clarification. This trains the viewer to associate suffering with silence, to expect confusion, to assume that pain has a purpose, even if it is never revealed. The conditioning is twofold. Obey the pain, and do not ask questions. Even acts of sacrifice are hollowed out. Mag's death, meant to be moving, becomes another beat in the march of narrative efficiency. The Morphling's suicide is barely lingered on. Rue, once symbolic of hope, is replaced. No space is made for mourning. Each death reinforces the system's true function: expendable emotion, ritualized loss, and the suppression of meaning. The arena's structure reinforces this lesson through time. Every hour, a new trauma. Every hour, a new wound. Fear becomes scheduled. Panic becomes pattern. This turns terror into ritual and normalizes emotional decay. The repetition is hypnotic. Fog, wave, monkeys, jabberjays. The audience, like the tributes, begins to anticipate each trauma rather than resist it. Predictive obedience is reinforced. You begin to think like the system. Beatty is a crucial figure in this schema. He does not protest the rules. He deciphers them. He does not challenge the arena's structure. He maps it. His genius is never used to dismantle control, only to navigate it. The viewer is shown that intelligence equals compliance. Understanding becomes a form of complicity. And once again, the true lesson emerges. Adapt or perish. Think, but don't resist. The result is a portrait of survival that is deeply hollow. By the end of the arena sequence, Katniss is physically alive but emotionally muted. Her instincts have been dulled. Her trust is fractured. She operates on reflex rather than on principle. This is the end point of obedience training. It's not based on freedom or clarity, just function. And so we, the viewers, absorb this rhythm. We are guided to cheer endurance in place of agency. We are taught to admire stoicism in place of sovereignty. The film does not tell us to submit. It shows us what submission looks like when it has been perfected. The numb hero, the silent pain, the obedient mind. This is not a story of rebellion. It is a story of training. And the arena isn't just a setting, it's a simulation. A psychological model for how to endure control without breaking the rules. And without breaking yourself visibly. But inside, something essential is already gone. Section 5. The hero as a pacification technique. As Catching Fire builds toward its climax, it delivers its most emotionally potent illusion, one so effective that it dissolves beneath analysis only with great effort. The construction of the hero as a form of emotional anesthesia. Katniss Everdeen isn't just the protagonist. She is the pacifier and affects the audience like a sedative. She is the emblem that turns viewers into spectators instead of participants. She channels revolutionary emotion into reverent inaction. This is not a flaw in the narrative. It is its core function. The system doesn't merely fear Katniss. It reframes her. It elevates her to icon status, but doesn't do so to empower her, but to limit her. She becomes too precious to act, too symbolic to disrupt, too beloved to be allowed agency. The result is that the more the system appears to fear her, the more deeply it controls her. And by extension, the more deeply it controls us. From the moment Katniss survives the first games, her role is redefined. She's no longer a girl surviving on instinct. She's now an emblem, a mascot for conflicting forces. The capital wants her to play the lover, the grateful tribute, the smiling victor. The rebellion wants her to become the face of resistance. But neither side gives her real autonomy. She is a tool for shaping emotion rather than events. And this mirrors the experience of the viewer, to be emotionally involved, but structurally excluded. What the film constructs isn't a hero who breaks systems, but one who is absorbed by them. Katniss's symbolic value increases as her personal agency decreases. Each scene of pain deepens her mythos. Each sacrifice she witnesses enlarges her emotional aura. But this aura does not lead to transformation. It leads to paralysis. She becomes more watched, more followed, more admired, but less free. The viewer, unconsciously, learns the same equation. To be moved is enough. To feel is to fulfill your role. President Snow grasps this power dynamic before anyone else. His goal isn't to kill Katniss. It is to control the narrative she represents. He understands that revolutions don't begin with violence. They begin with emotion. And whoever owns the emotional frame owns the future. Snow's line, "She's not who they think she is not just a strategic assessment. It is a warning. If Katniss becomes a free actor rather than a symbolic one, the system loses control of the script. So both sides act quickly. The Capitol engineers the wedding dress, the televised engagement, the pregnancy twist, creating a spectacle of love and sacrifice that pacifies the masses. Meanwhile, the rebels, particularly Haymitch and Plutarch, manipulate her into emotional corners. They withhold truth from her to shape her response rather than to protect her. Her confusion becomes a tactic. Her breakdown becomes a broadcast. Her humanity becomes marketing. When Plutarch says, "We had to keep her in the dark," he isn't speaking only as a character, but as a designer. She cannot know the plan because her authentic reactions are more valuable beyond her inlet-formed consent. Her tears are more useful than her decisions. Her anguish is more mobilizing than her clarity. And in this moment, Katniss is no longer a person. She is a campaign. The film trains us to accept this transformation without resistance. In fact, it rewards us emotionally for witnessing it. Her suffering becomes our catharsis. Her trauma becomes our climax. Her face, trembling and wordless in the hovercraft, is offered not as a call to arms, but as closure. The system has broken her, and because she still exists, we are satisfied. Because she was hurt, we feel we have participated. This is pacification through projection. The real brilliance of this structure lies in what it removes. Action. No strategy is shown. No organizing is discussed. No plans are shared. The rebellion, as presented, is not a network or a system. It is a feeling. And the hero is not a builder or a thinker. She is a symbol. This emotional framework is deeply effective because it mirrors how power functions in the real world. Allow the people to cry, to mourn, to scream, as long as they do not organize. The function of Katniss is precisely this. She carries the pain of the people. She gives them a face to believe in. She absorbs their unrest, their rage, their grief. But she does not give them tools. She does not give them vision. She cannot, because she herself has none. All her power is borrowed. All her influence is assigned. She is a conduit, not a creator. And that is what makes her so safe. This is the true genius of using the hero as a pacification technique. It makes the people feel powerful by identifying with someone who has none. It delivers the full spectrum of rebellion's emotional arc. Hope, fear, love, loss, defiance, collapse, without ever presenting risk to the actual structure of control. The revolution happens in hearts, not in systems. The viewer is emotionally awakened, but politically asleep. The camera confirms this. We are never shown the machinery of rebellion. We do not see networks forming. We do not witness conversations about tactics, resources, logistics. We are shown a face, a trembling hand, a broken voice. The language is personal, not political. The training is emotional instead of strategic. This is not by mistake. It is by design. The viewer is being taught. Trust the icon and feel deeply, but do nothing. In predictive programming terms, this is the final preparation. It is not enough to show you that rebellion is orchestrated. It must also show you that leadership is performance, that symbols are more powerful than systems, that one person's image, pain, or charisma can replace collective action. This is the psychological endpoint of control, self-erasure through admiration. And so the story ends with a ritual close-up, the face of the broken hero. When Katniss's eyes open in the final shot, they don't open with fury. Instead, they open with emptiness. We are meant to project resolve onto that silence. We are meant to see hope in the absence of speech. But what we are truly seeing is the completion of the spell. The rebellion has a face. And so the people will wait. They will wait for her to lead, and they will wait for her to rise. They will wait for her next move. And while they wait, the system will heal, recalibrate, and prepare its next script. This is the cost of icon-based revolution. Everyone watches, but no one acts. And the system remains intact. Because the hero did not save them, she only distracted them. Conclusion? If this is the arena, imagine just for a moment that we are not watching a story about a dystopia, but participating in one. That the world we inhabit is not fundamentally different from Panem, but rather more advanced in its disguise. That our systems of control are not enforced by force, but by feeling. That our rebellions are not crushed, but redirected. That our arena is not a jungle, but a screen. What if we already live in a world where power presents itself as protection? Where censorship is disguised as safety? Where emotional loyalty to symbols replaces critical awareness of structures? What if the stories we consume, including Catching Fire itself, are not warnings, but blueprints? A society does not need to declare itself authoritarian to be so. It only needs to control attention. And if attention can be captured by stories, by performances, by carefully managed heroes and enemies, then freedom becomes a performance too. The illusion is enough. You don't need to build walls if you can build belief. Entertainment, in this context, is not a break from reality. It is the reality. It teaches us how to feel, when to cry, whom to trust, and where to look. And when it is weaponized, it teaches us how to endure systems we would otherwise resist. A dystopia does not succeed because people love oppression. It succeeds because people are trained to love the narrative that explains it. This is how predictive programming functions. It does not tell you what will happen. It prepares you to accept it when it happens. It surrounds you with symbols of rebellion, so you no longer recognize real control. It offers you ritual instead of action, catharsis instead of clarity, and a hero to cheer for so you never become one yourself. Catching Fire shows us this, and still, we cheer. We follow Katniss's pain as if it's our own. But when the screen fades to black, we do not pick up her struggle. We return to our lives, subtly altered, conditioned to feel strongly and act passively, conditioned to believe that televised resistance is enough, that symbolic victory is real. But what if the games never ended? What if our news cycles, our debates, our social media wars are all arenas? What if the outrage is scheduled, the alliances engineered, the villains cast for effect? And what if every emotion you feel while watching, hope, despair, fear, pride, is not just observed by power but designed by it? In that case, Katniss is not just a character, she's a mirror. And the real question becomes, what do you see when you look at her? A warrior, a warning, or a placeholder, occupying the space where your own courage might live? Because if we are inside the arena, and we do not know it, then every story is a test. And the greatest victory of the system is that we don't recognize we're in the games at all. A better version of this story. Imagine a version of Catching Fire where the rebellion doesn't end in symbolism, but begins in structure. Where Katniss isn't manipulated, sedated, and shaped into a weapon by competing factions, but becomes aware of how both the Capitol and the rebels are using her. In this version, the story isn't about surviving the arena, but about recognizing it and stepping outside it. Instead of being kept in the dark, Katniss is told the truth. Haymitch and Plutarch do not manipulate her trauma for strategic optics. They treat her like an equal and reveal how stories are crafted, how media is shaped, how power performs rebellion to maintain control. And as she begins to understand the mechanics behind her image, she stops performing for the cameras and begins speaking to the people directly. In this version, the arena is not just a battleground. It is the last illusion. As the games progress, Katniss begins broadcasting messages of clarity instead of signals of pain. She tells the other tributes the truth, that their suffering is being used, that their alliances are being observed to train the watching audience instead of empowering them, and together, they choose to refuse the script, disrupt the rhythm, and walk away from the game entirely. This version does not glorify obedience or suffering. It breaks the cycle. Instead of ritual death, the tributes initiate ritual truth. They use the Capitol's own broadcast system to expose how rebellion has been co-opted. They reveal the faces behind the curtain. They show the districts how to overcome the system instead of showing them a symbol. They do not just inspire rage. They teach others how to think, how to build, and how to connect beyond fear. And in this version, Katniss is not alone. She does not carry the burden of symbolism. Instead, she becomes part of a movement that values process over performance. The rebellion that forms is not reactive, but intentional. It is built offline instead of being orchestrated for television. It takes place in kitchens, in forests, in hidden networks. The people do not wait to be saved. They begin saving each other. The story ends with a quiet moment of shared planning, instead a close-up of a trembling face. And Katniss sits in dialogue. Eyes open, hands moving, maps on the table instead of in silence. And the camera does not cut to black. It lingers on collaboration, on learning, on a world no longer waiting for heroes. This version of Catching Fire would not sell control wrapped in catharsis. It would model resistance grounded in trust. It would not glorify suffering. It would show healing. It would not ask us to watch and feel. It would ask us to know and act. Because in this story, revolution would not be something you witness. It would be something you remember how to do. Thank you for staying with me through this long descent beneath the surface. A film like Catching Fire carries far more than a plot or a message. It weaves emotional pathways into our perception, guiding how we respond to power, how we interpret resistance, and how we place ourselves inside systems that appear open while operating through precision control. When we slow down enough to observe the current beneath the performance, something begins to return. A sense of awareness that feels ancient, a recognition that the story we've been following may be less about liberation and more about teaching us how to wait. If something in this reflection stirred a recognition, a feeling you've carried without words until now, I invite you to pass that signal forward. These insights do not spread through slogans or force. They spread through quiet awakenings between those still willing to question the rhythm. A shift always begins with presence and with the willingness to see, and then to stay with what is seen. And as we continue together, there is something to prepare for. The next film we examine may wear a softer mask. It may arrive with lightness, beauty, or a tone that reassures. But the emotional choreography it delivers may serve a deeper program, one that doesn't shout commands, but whispers habits. One that teaches through desire, and one that reshapes through rhythm. Control rarely arrives with force. It prefers to arrive with familiarity. And the next story we explore may already live inside us, disguised as something we once loved. And if there's a movie or show you'd like us to decode, let me know in the comments section.